The cup was still warm in my hand when she said it. Not hot. I'd already let it sit too long on the counter while I folded the towels she'd left in a damp heap on the dryer. Warm enough to hold without burning. Cool enough to know I'd been standing there longer than I meant to. I was halfway up the stairs when her voice came from the doorway behind me. Calm. Certain. The way you'd tell a child which chair is theirs at dinner. Mom, you don't really belong upstairs anymore. I stopped. My palm found the banister, cool under my fingers. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator 2 rooms over and the creaking of old wood beneath my feet. I didn't turn around. Didn't answer. Not yet. She went on, something about the guest room on the main floor being more practical, about how the stairs were getting steeper, about how we had talked it over. I knew who that meant. My daughter and the woman who'd moved in 6 months ago and rearranged the spice drawer without asking. I took one more step. Then another. The tea trembled, just slightly, a gold ripple across the surface. I have lived in this house for 34 years. I picked the banister stain. I chose the bedroom at the top of the stairs because the window faces east and the light comes in clean and silent just after dawn. I know which boards creak and which corners hold the cold. And I know what it sounds like when someone tries to evict you with kindness. I didn't say any of that. I reached the landing, stepped into the dim hallway, and closed my bedroom door with the gentlest click I could manage. Not a slam. Not a silence. Just the soft sound of a woman deciding that some things cannot be explained until they are already done. I set the tea on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, still made from that morning, the quilt my mother pieced pulling taut under my weight. The room smelled faintly of lilac sachets I keep in the dresser. Dust hung in the slant of late afternoon light. My hands were steady now. Beat. I understood, then, what would have to change. Not everything. Not loudly. But soon. Within 7 days, the locks would be different. Within 7 days, I would have signed papers in a quiet office that smelled of new carpet and brewing coffee, redirecting what was mine back into my own name. Within 7 days, I would carry my winter coat back into the upstairs closet and hang it where it belonged, and no one would take it down again without asking. I didn't know all of that yet, not the sequence, not the precise hours. But I knew the shape of it, the way you see a season turning before the leaves begin to fall. You feel it in the air first. Then the light. Then the quiet rearranging of your own resolve. Some repairs make no sound. That's what I would learn. What I was beginning to learn even then, sitting on the quilt in a room I'd been told, politely, was no longer mine to occupy. I looked out the window. Rain was gathering in the clouds to the west, the sky bruised purple and soft gray. The kind of weather that makes you want tea and a book and a door that locks from the inside. I thought about my mother. How she'd spent her last decade in a room barely larger than a closet, in a house she'd scrubbed and saved for, because my brother's wife said it was easier if she stayed downstairs. How she never argued. How she died with her good jewelry still in a box under someone else's bed. I would not do that. I would not become small because it was easier for someone else. The rain began, soft taps on the glass, then a low static hush that filled the silence. I stood, smoothed the quilt, and walked back downstairs for dinner as if nothing had shifted. But it had. And in less than a week, everyone would know. It had been small things, at first. The chair at the kitchen table, the one near the window where I used to sit with my coffee and watch the birds pick at the feeder, became extra seating the week after my daughter-in-law moved in. Not taken, exactly. Just quietly reassigned. A sweater draped over the back. A laptop left open. A subtle lesson in territory I was meant to absorb without protest. I moved to the chair by the door. Farther from the light. Closer to the draft. No one said anything. Then the cups. I noticed it one morning in March when I opened the cabinet and reached, by habit, for the wide ceramic mug my son had given me years ago, thick-walled, steady, the glaze a deep amber that made tea look richer than it was. It wasn't there. I found it later, on a higher shelf, behind a row of new glass tumblers I'd never seen before. I pulled a different mug. Smaller. Thinner. White and forgettable. I poured my tea and said nothing. Breath. There were other things. The thermostat was adjusted without discussion. The television volume was always just a notch too low for me to hear clearly, though no one else seemed to mind. The bathroom schedule that shifted, wordlessly, so that I was always last in the morning, waiting while someone else showered, blow-dried, claimed the mirror and the counter and the small humid warmth that used to be mine. Politeness can bruise. I had been polite. I had smiled when my daughter explained, gently, that the downstairs hallway would be better for storage now, and could I move my winter boots? I had nodded when she suggested we eat earlier because her wife preferred it, and wasn't it better for digestion anyway? I had poured myself smaller portions because the plates were smaller and the servings were measured, and there was never quite enough left if I wanted more. I had been good. And I had been erased, one kindness at a time. The moment on the stairs was not the first humiliation. It was only the first one I could not pretend away. That night at dinner, before everything changed, while I was still deciding how to change it, my daughter set down a bowl of soup in front of me. A small bowl. She set a larger one in front of her wife, and another in front of herself, and began talking about their weekend plans as if I were not there. Not as if I were not there. As if I were furniture. Expected. Permanent. Silent. I ate slowly. I tasted nothing. Across the table, they laughed about something I hadn't heard. I used to be part of the laughter in this house. I used to be the one who made it. I set my spoon down before the bowl was empty and excused myself. Neither looked up. Upstairs, while I still could go upstairs, I sat on the bed again and let myself name it. This was not care. This was not multigenerational harmony. This was not love. This was a slow removal. Gentle disposal. The kind you don't fight because fighting would make you the problem, the difficult one, the aging woman who couldn't just be grateful for a roof and a bed and the charity of her own child. I would not be grateful for crumbs in the house I bought. I reached into my nightstand and pulled out a notepad, pale blue, and used, the kind you buy in a 3-pack and forget. I uncapped a pen. My hand was steady. At the top of the page, I wrote. Asterisk what I owe. What I don't. And I began. I owe kindness. I do not owe silence. I owe respect. I do not owe my space, my schedule, my name on documents I never signed. I owe honesty. I do not owe the fiction that I am fragile, forgetful, or finished. The pen moved faster now, the scratch of it oddly comforting, a sound I controlled. I owe gratitude for genuine care. I do not owe gratitude for being tolerated in my own home. I owe my daughter the truth of who I am. I do not owe her a mother who shrinks. I stopped. Read it back. Felt something in my chest unlock. This was not a list of grievances. It was a blueprint. I turned the page. Asterisk what I will do. Gathered documents, deed, bank statements, titles, passwords. Everything with my name. Call Ellen. Ellen was a lawyer. Not my lawyer, she did estates and trusts, and we'd worked together years ago when I was still doing bookkeeping for the nonprofit downtown. We'd kept in touch the way women do when they recognize something steady in each other. A coffee every few months. A card at Christmas. The kind of friendship that doesn't demand much but offers everything when it's needed. I would call her on Monday. Go to the bank. Redirect statements to AP. Box. Ask questions about joint accounts I never agreed to. Change the locks. I hesitated on that one. It felt large. defiant. The kind of thing that would burn a bridge. But bridges can be rebuilt. Dignity, once given away, is harder to reclaim. I wrote it again, slower this time, pressing the pen down until the ink bled slightly into the paper. Change the locks. Move my things back upstairs. Not in anger. In fact. Decide what comes next, not in fear, but in clarity. I set the pen down. My hand ached, just a little, the way it does now after writing for too long. I flexed my fingers and looked at the list. It was not revenge. It was repaired. Silence is not consent. I had been silent long enough. Beat. That night, I barely slept. Not from worry, something else. The hum of a plan taking shape, the way a house settles differently once you decided to stay. In the morning, I would begin. I had spent 67 years learning how to be good. It was time to remember how to be whole. Monday came in soft and gray, the sky still sleepy with leftover rain. I dressed carefully, not formally, but with intention. A wool cardigan, the color of rest. Comfortable shoes. My mother's watch, which still kept time if you wound it every morning. I wound it. Slipped it on. Felt its small weight settle against my wrist. Downstairs, the kitchen was empty. My daughter had already left for work, her wife was still asleep. I made toast. Ate it standing by the window. Drank my tea from the small white cup because I didn't have the energy yet to reclaim the amber one. But I would. I rinsed the cup, set it in the drainer, and pulled on my raincoat, a long slate blue one I'd bought myself 2 birthdays ago, back when I still believed I was allowed to choose things. I walked. The bank was 4 blocks west, then 2 blocks south, past the bakery that still smelled like yeast and sugar even from the sidewalk, past the park where the benches were slick with dew. I didn't rush. I let my feet remember the rhythm of walking somewhere that mattered. The bank was new, renovated 2 years ago into all glass and smooth stone, the kind of place that wanted you to feel like money was clean and simple. I pulled open the heavy door and stepped into the hush of air conditioning and murmured transactions. A young man at the desk looked up and smiled. Professional. Warm enough. Good morning. How can I help you? I smiled back. Calm. Dignified. I need to update my account information, I said. And I'd like to review any joint authorizations currently on file. He nodded, tapped at his keyboard, and asked for my ID. I handed it over. It took 20 minutes. Maybe less. He printed forms. I read every line. Signed where I needed to. Declined what I didn't. When I walked out, the rain had stopped, and the street gleamed like polished metal. I had redirected my pension deposits. I had removed a joint account holder I'd never added. I had requested that new statements be sent to an address that I would access. Fictional narrative. Not legal/financial advice. But it was my narrative now. My advice to myself. And it was sound. Breath. From the bank, I walked 3 more blocks to a low brick building with a brass plaque by the door, Ellen Yates, Estate Planning and Trust Law. I hadn't called ahead. I'd thought about it, then decided that if I gave myself too much time, I might talk myself out of it. Better to simply arrive. To show up for myself the way I'd shown up for everyone else. The receptionist, a woman about my age with reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked up and smiled. Do you have an appointment? No, I said. But I'm hoping Ellen has a few minutes. My name is Claire Whitmore. She'll remember me. The woman picked up the phone, murmured something I couldn't hear, then nodded. She'll be right out. Ellen appeared less than a minute later, still tall and straight-shouldered, her hair silver now but her eyes exactly as I remembered, sharp and kind at once. Claire. She smiled, surprised but not displeased. It's been too long. It has, I said. I'm sorry to come unannounced. Don't be. Come in. Her office smelled like paper and old wood and the faint citrus of whatever tea she kept in a thermos on her desk. She gestured to a chair, closed the door, and sat across from me. What's going on? I told her. Not everything, not the smallness of the cups or the coldness of the chair by the door. But enough. The house. The pressure to move downstairs. The documents I suspected had been drawn up without my full understanding. The need to make sure that what was mine stayed mine, legally and clearly, for as long as I was alive and after. Ellen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and nodded once. You're not the first woman who sat in that chair and told me this story, she said quietly. And you won't be the last. Something in me eased. Can you help? Yes. She pulled a notepad toward her. Let's start with what you own, what's titled in your name, and who currently has power of attorney, if anyone. We worked for an hour. Maybe more. She asked questions. I answered. She made notes, suggested steps, outlined options. There was no drama. No raised voices. Just two women sitting in a quiet office, rebuilding a life with paperwork and clarity. When I left, I had a folder under my arm and a follow-up appointment scheduled for Thursday. I had a plan to retitle the house solely in my name, something I should have done years ago. I had language for a healthcare directive that named someone I trusted, not someone who'd simply assumed the role. I had my life back in my hands, one document at a time. Dignity signs its own papers. I walked home in the cool afternoon air, my coat pulled close, the folder pressed against my chest like a shield I'd forgotten I was allowed to carry. Wednesday was bright and mild, the kind of day that makes you believe in second chances. My daughter and her wife had driven to the coast for the night, some anniversary, some need to get away. They'd told me the day before, casually, as if I didn't need details. As if I were a houseplant they were leaving behind, expecting I'd still be upright when they returned. I waited until their car disappeared around the corner. Then I made a call. The locksmith arrived just after noon. A quiet man, maybe 50, with careful hands and a toolbox that smelled like metal and oil. I showed him the front door, the back door, and the side entrance by the garage that no one used but that still needed securing. All three? He asked. All three, I said. He nodded and got to work. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the drill's low whine, the tumble of pins and springs, the screw turn of something being made new. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. Not from fear. From the strange, startling brightness of taking up space on purpose. It took less than an hour. He handed me 3 sets of keys on a plain metal ring. Showed me how the deadbolts worked, smooth and stiff and certain. I paid him in cash. Thanked him. Watched him leave. Then I locked the door behind him. The sound, small, metallic, final, rang through the quiet house. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the lock, feeling the ridges of the new key pressing into my palm. Control need not shout. I walked upstairs. Unlocked the bedroom door I'd begun keeping closed. Stepped inside. The room was just as I'd left it, the quilt smooth, the sachets still faint in the drawers, the window still facing east. But it felt different now. Not because it had changed. Because I had. I opened the closet and pulled down my winter coat, the long wool one, charcoal gray, the one I hadn't worn since someone suggested the hall closet downstairs was better for everyone. I carried it back to the upstairs closet. Hung it on the leftmost hook, where it had hung for 15 years. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself breathe. Asterisk fictional narrative. Not legal/financial advice. I had changed the locks. I had signed papers. I had drawn lines I'd been told were ungenerous, unkind, unseemly for a woman my age. But I had drawn them nonetheless. And the house had not collapsed. The sky had not opened. I had not become cruel. I had simply become clear. Outside, a sparrow landed on the windowsill, cocked its head, then flew off toward the lilac bush below. I watched it go, then stood and straightened the quilt one more time before heading back downstairs. There was still dinner to make. Still a life to live. But now it was mine. They came home Thursday evening, just after 6. I heard the car in the driveway, the double thunk of doors closing, the scrape of keys that would no longer work. A pause. Then another try. Then the doorbell. I dried my hands on a towel, walked slowly to the front door, and opened it. My daughter stood on the porch, her wife just behind her, both of them holding weekend bags and wearing confusion like a coat. Mom. My daughter's voice was careful. The key didn't work. I know, I said. I changed the locks. Silence. Her wife blinked. My daughter's mouth opened, closed. Opened again. You, what? I changed the locks, I repeated. Calm. Even. It's my house. I'm allowed. I handed her a new key. Just one. She took it without thinking, staring at it as if it might explain something her mother would not. Why would you? She stopped. Her face was doing something between anger and shock, and I could see her deciding which to lead with. She chose anger. You can't just lock us out. I didn't lock you out. I gave you a key. You live here. But I own here. I stepped aside to let them in. We're having dinner in 20 minutes. You're welcome to join me. I walked back to the kitchen. Behind me, I heard the quiet hiss of an argument I was not part of. I heard the door close. I heard footsteps, sharp, quick, follow me into the kitchen. Mom. My daughter's voice was louder now, tight. What is this? What's going on? I stirred the pot on the stove, soup, simple, the kind I used to make when she was small and the world was easier. I didn't look up. I'm making dinner. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean. I set the spoon down, turned to face her. You told me I didn't belong upstairs. I decided you were wrong. Her face went pale, then pink. I didn't. I wasn't trying to kick you out, I was trying to make things easier. For whom? She faltered. I watched her search for an answer and come up empty. Her wife appeared in the doorway, arms folded, mouth a thin line. This is really unfair, she said. We've been letting you stay here. Letting me? I kept my voice soft. Polite. But I let the question hang. My daughter closed her eyes. She didn't mean it like that. Yes, she did. I looked at the woman in my doorway, this person I barely knew, who had moved into my house and rearranged my life as if I were a problem to be managed. And it's time we were honest. I don't need your permission to stay in the house I own. I don't need your approval to sleep in my own bedroom. And I don't need to be managed, minimized, or made smaller so you can feel comfortable. The room was very quiet. My daughter's eyes were shining now, but I couldn't tell if it was anger or something else. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said, and her voice cracked just a little. I know. And I did. I believed her. But you did anyway. And I'm not going to keep pretending I don't notice. I turned back to the stove. Ladled soup into bowls, 3 of them, all the same size. Set them on the table. Dinner's ready, I said. You can sit. Or you can go. But if you sit, we eat as equals. No more small bowls. No more small rooms. No more small life. I sat down. Picked up my spoon. After a long moment, my daughter sat across from me. Her wife stayed in the doorway for another breath, then walked out. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the guest room door closing. My daughter and I ate in silence. The soup was good. I'd added thyme and a bay leaf, the way my mother used to. It tasted like memory and defiance and something close to peace. Halfway through, my daughter set down her spoon and looked at me. I didn't know, she said quietly. I didn't know it felt like that. I met her eyes. Now you do. She nodded. Looked down. Picked up her spoon again. We finished the meal without speaking. But it wasn't the silence of erasure. It was the silence of something breaking open. Something that might, someday, become honest. Love isn't unpaid labor. And I was done working for scraps of my own dignity. Friday morning, the neighbor knocked. I was sitting on the porch with my second cup of tea, watching the light shift through the trees, when I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps on the gravel path that ran between our yards. Claire? I turned. It was Marianne, 73, widowed, sharp as fresh mint and twice as bracing. She carried a round tin in both hands, the kind that used to hold Christmas cookies but now held whatever Marianne decided the world needed. I brought biscuits, she said, as if that explained her arrival at 8 in the morning. I smiled. Then you'd better sit. She did, settling into the chair beside me with a sigh that spoke of knees and old wood and the general conspiracy of aging joints. She pried the lid off the tin and set it between us. Butter biscuits, golden and crumbly, the smell of them warm and plain and perfect. I took one. So did she. We ate in the easy quiet of people who don't need to fill silence with chatter. After a while, she spoke. I heard the locksmith. I glanced at her. She was looking straight ahead, her face unreadable. Did you? She brushed crumbs from her lap. Good locks? Berry. She nodded. Took another biscuit. About time. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. You think so? I know so. She turned to me then, her eyes the pale gray of river stones. I waited too long to do the same thing. Let my son and his wife move in after Robert died, and before I knew it, I was living in the back bedroom like a tenant. She smiled, but it was thin. Took me 3 years to get them out. By then, I'd forgotten how to be loud. You're plenty loud, I said. Now I am. She bit into the biscuit. Wasn't always. A breeze moved through the lilac bush at the edge of the porch, shaking loose a few pale purple blossoms. They drifted down, soundless, and settled on the boards between us. I'm not trying to be cruel, I said quietly. I just need to stop disappearing. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Marianne reached over and patted my hand once, brisk and firm. And anyone who tells you different is scared you'll teach them how to do it too. Beat. We sat for another 20 minutes. She told me about her daughter in Oregon, about the grandson who'd sent her an email asking if she was doing okay financially, as if he were circling. I told her about Ellen, about the papers I'd signed, about the blue folder that now lived in my nightstand like a passport to a country I was just beginning to visit. She listened the way women of a certain age learn to listen, without interrupting, without fixing, without diminishing. When she stood to leave, she pressed the tin into my hands. Keep them. You need to eat more anyway. You're getting thin. I'm not. You are. And it's not the good kind of thin. It's the kind that happens when you forget you're allowed to take up space. She touched my shoulder, brief and warm. Take up space, Claire. The world will adjust. I watched her walk back across the yard, her frame small but unshaken, and I thought about all the women I'd known who'd spent their lives folding themselves into smaller and smaller shapes until there was nothing left but apology. I would not be one of them. Kindness is a quiet witness. Marianne had seen me. Had named what I was doing without shame or scandal. Had brought biscuits and the kind of permission I didn't know I needed. I carried the tin inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and ate one more for breakfast. Then I went upstairs and got to work. The blue binder had been sitting in the hall closet for 2 years, unopened. I'd bought it on a whim, one of those moments when you walk past the office supply aisle and think, I should organize my papers. And then life happens, and the binder stays wrapped in plastic, and the papers stay scattered in drawers and shoeboxes and the glove box of a car you don't drive anymore. I pulled it down now. Peeled off the plastic. Set it on the kitchen table. For a moment, I just looked at it. Navy blue, plain, 3 rings, a clear pocket on the front for a label I hadn't written yet. Then I began. Breath. First, the deed. I found it in the desk drawer, folded into an envelope I hadn't opened in a decade. I smoothed it flat, read my name, Claire Whitmore *, and felt the odd relief of seeing it in ink, official, mine. I slipped it into the front sleeve. Next, insurance policies. Life, health, and the homeowner's policy, I paid for every year without looking at them. I read through them now, slowly, checking names and beneficiaries and clauses I'd signed without questioning. Some would need updating. I made notes on a pad beside me. Then, bank statements. Old tax returns. The title to the car. The letter from my pension fund. Receipts for things I'd paid for and never been thanked for, repairs, renovations, the new roof 3 years ago that my daughter said we needed, but that I alone had funded. I didn't do this in anger. I did it in accounting. There is a difference. Fictional narrative. Not legal/financial advice. By mid-afternoon, the table was covered in paper. I sorted. I labeled. I made a checklist on the inside cover of the binder. Heavy checkmark deed, updated, sole name. Heavy checkmark bank accounts, redirected. Heavy checkmark healthcare directive, signed, copy to Ellen. Black lozenge will, appointment next week. Black lozenge beneficiaries, review and update. Black lozenge passwords, write down, seal, store safely. Some of it was done. Some of it was still in motion. But all of it, was now visible. Named. Claimed. I made a pot of tea and sat back down. The house was quiet. My daughter and her wife were both at work. I had the whole afternoon. I opened the binder to a blank divider and wrote, in careful print. For myself and after. This was not a file to be handed off when I became inconvenient. This was a record. Proof that I had lived with intention. That I had not drifted into oblivion but had steered, deliberately, toward my own horizon. I thought about my mother again. How little she'd left behind. How few papers bore her name. How her life had been parsed and packed and given away by people who'd never asked what she wanted. I would not let that be my story. I wrote another list, this one smaller, tucked into the back pocket of the binder. Things I want To sleep in my own bed. To drink tea from the amber mug. To be spoken to, not around. To leave something behind that has my name on it, in my own handwriting. I closed the binder. Ran my hand over the smooth cover. It was such a small thing. A few dollars of vinyl and paper. But it felt like a cornerstone. Editing is another kind of love. I was editing my life. Cutting what didn't serve. Keeping what was true. Making space for a final act that would be mine, not managed, not minimized, but whole. I shelved the binder in my bedroom closet, behind the winter scarves, where only I would know to look. And then I went downstairs and made myself dinner. A full plate. The amber mug. I sat in the chair by the window. And I ate every bite. Saturday arrived cool and clear, the morning air smelling of cut grass and distant chimney smoke. I woke early, as I always do, and lay still for a moment in the bed I had reclaimed. The light came through the east window just as it used to, clean, pale, the color of new paper. I watched it slide across the quilt and thought about all the mornings I'd missed up here, exiled to a dim downstairs room where the sun never quite reached. Not anymore. I rose. Dressed. Wound my mother's watch. Today, I would finish what I'd started. I waited until I heard my daughter's footsteps on the stairs, the shuffle and sigh of someone still waking. I waited until I heard the coffee maker hiss and settle. Then I came down. She was standing at the counter, her back to me, pouring coffee into a blue mug I didn't recognize. New, probably. One more small replacement I hadn't noticed. "Good morning," I said. She turned, startled. "Morning." Her face was careful. We hadn't spoken much since the soup. She'd been avoiding me, I think. Or I'd been avoiding her. Hard to say. "I'm moving my things back upstairs today," I said. No preamble. No apology. She blinked. Set the mug down. "Mom." "I'm not asking permission," I said gently. "I'm telling you." "But we talked about this." "The stairs." "The stairs are fine." "I'm fine. And I'm going back to the room I chose 34 years ago." She opened her mouth. Closed it. I could see her calculating, how hard to push, how much to resist, whether this was a battle she could win. I saved her the trouble. "This is not a punishment," I said. "It's not about you. It's about me deciding I'm allowed to live in my own house the way I want to live." She looked away. "You make it sound like we were trying to control you." "Weren't you?" The silence stretched. She didn't answer. I picked up my tea from the amber mug, which I'd retrieved from the high shelf the night before, and took a slow sip. "You're welcome to stay," I said. "Both of you. But not as landlords. Not as managers. As guests. If you can do that, we'll be fine. If you can't." I let the sentence hang. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something shift in her face. Not surrender. Something softer. Something close to recognition. "I don't want to fight," she said quietly. "Neither do I." I set the mug down. "So let's not beat." By late morning, I'd carried my clothes back upstairs. My books. The framed picture of my mother that had sat on the downstairs dresser was gathering dust. The lavender sachets. The small wooden box that held my wedding ring, a lock of my son's baby hair, and the ticket stub from the last movie my husband and I saw before he died. Everything that mattered. I opened the closet and hung my dresses in a row. I set my shoes beneath them. I placed the picture on the dresser and adjusted it until it sat just right, my mother's face solemn and young and certain. Then I stood in the center of the room and turned slowly, taking it in. The quilt. The window. The light. Mine. I heard footsteps in the hall. My daughter appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "Need help?" I smiled. "I'm all right. But thank you." She nodded. Lingered. Then, quietly, "It looks good. You being up here again." I met her eyes. "It feels good." She nodded again and left. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the moment settle. I had done it. I had reclaimed my space, my documents, my mornings. I had set boundaries without burning bridges. I had been firm without cruelty. And I had survived it. More than survived. I had begun again. Belonging is claimed, not given. No one was going to hand me my dignity. No one was going to permit me to exist fully in the life I'd built. I had to take it back. And I had. I smoothed the quilt, stood, and walked to the window. Outside, the lilac bush swayed in a slight breeze, scattering petals onto the grass below. A crow landed on the fence, cocked its head, then launched itself back into the sky. I watched it disappear into the trees. Then I turned and went back downstairs to make lunch. There was no fanfare. No declaration. Just the quiet, steady sound of a woman walking through her own house as if she belonged there. Because she did. Sunday morning came wrapped in rain. Not the hard, angry kind, the soft, constant kind that blurs the windows and makes the world feel smaller, gentler. I woke to the sound of it tapping against the glass, a rhythm I'd missed while sleeping downstairs, where the rain always sounded farther away. I lay still for a while, listening. Then I rose, pulled on my robe, and went down to the kitchen. The house was silent. My daughter and her wife were still asleep, or at least still upstairs in the guest room, where they'd moved their things without discussion after I reclaimed the master bedroom. We had not talked about it. We didn't need to. The geography of the house had shifted, and everyone had adjusted. I filled the kettle. Set it on the stove. Sliced bread, thick, grainy, the kind I liked, and set it in the toaster. While I waited, I stood at the window and watched the rain. It came down in soft sheets, pooling in the low spots of the yard, darkening the fence, turning the lilac leaves a deeper green. The light was gray and even, the kind that makes you feel like the day has no edges, just a slow, continuous now. The kettle hissed. I poured water over the tea leaves and let them steep, watching the color bleed into the cup, amber, rust, gold. The toast popped. I buttered it. Added a thin layer of jam. Poured the tea. Then I carried it all to the table and sat in the chair by the window. The same chair I'd lost, months ago, when someone else decided it was theirs. I had it back now. Breath. I ate slowly. The butter was soft and salty. The jam tasted like summer fruit and sugar. The tea was hot and strong and exactly the way I liked it. I was not hiding. I was not performing. I was simply here. Eating breakfast. Watching the rain. Living. It had been a week since the moment on the stairs. 7 days since my daughter told me I didn't belong upstairs, and I decided she was wrong. In that week, I had changed the locks. Signed papers. Moved back into my bedroom. Reclaimed my mornings, my table, my mug. Started to remember what it felt like to be whole. It was not dramatic. There had been no shouting, no slammed doors, no expulsion. Just a quiet correction. Just a woman deciding, one small choice at a time, that she would not be erased. Some repairs make no sound. I thought about my mother again. I'd been thinking about her a lot lately. How she'd let herself be managed, reassigned, tucked into corners because it was easier than fighting. How she'd died without reclaiming anything. I used to think that was grace. Now I knew it was grief. Beat. Footsteps on the stairs. My daughter appeared, barefoot, her hair still tangled from sleep. She paused when she saw me, then came into the kitchen and poured herself coffee. "Morning," she said. "Good morning." She leaned against the counter, holding the mug in both hands. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "I'm sorry." I looked up. For what I said. On the stairs. For. She trailed off. Started again. For not seeing it. What was happening? I set down my toast. "Thank you." She nodded. Stared into her coffee. "I don't know how to fix it." "You don't have to fix it," I said. "You just have to stop breaking it." She looked at me, something raw in her face. "I didn't mean to." "I know." And I did. But intention doesn't erase impact. And I needed you to know that. She nodded slowly. Looked away. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat. We didn't talk much after that. Just small things. The rain. Her work. A movie she'd watched. But it was different now. Not the silence of exclusion. The silence of two people remembering how to share space without one of them disappearing. It wasn't fixed. It might never be fixed, not completely. But it was beginning. And the beginning was enough. Breath. Later, after she'd gone back upstairs, I washed my dishes and stood at the window again. The rain was lighter now, a fine mist that clung to the glass. The world outside looked soft, like a painting left out in the weather. I thought about everything I'd done in the past week. Everything I'd claimed. I thought about the women who would come after me, my daughter, maybe, or her daughter, if she ever had one. I thought about Marianne next door, who'd waited too long and lost too much. I thought about all the women who'd been taught that taking up space was selfish, that asking for what they needed was unkind. I thought about what I might say to them, if I could. It would be this. Repair begins where bitterness ends. You do not have to rage to reclaim yourself. You do not have to burn the house down to prove you own it. You just have to stop apologizing for existing. You just have to remember that you were never the problem. The problem was being told you were. And once you see that, once you name it, everything else is just paperwork and keys and deciding, one morning at a time, to stay. Beat. I poured myself another cup of tea. Sat back down. Outside, the rain continued. Soft. Steady. Persistent. Inside, I was warm. I was whole. I was home. And I was not leaving. The days that followed were unremarkable in the best way. I woke in my own bed. Drank tea from the amber mug. Ate meals at the table by the window. My daughter and her wife moved around me, careful at first, then gradually less so. We were learning a new choreography, one in which I was not scenery but a person with edges, preferences, boundaries. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, small collisions of expectation and reality. But we navigated them. We talked, sometimes. Other times, we just made space and let the silence do its work. Marianne came by twice more with biscuits, and once with a bag of tomatoes from her garden that she insisted I take, even though I told her I couldn't possibly eat them all. I made soup. Bought her half. We sat on her porch and talked about nothing and everything, the way women do when they've earned each other's trust. Ellen called to tell me the updated deed had been filed. My name, alone, on the house I'd lived in for 34 years. It should have always been that way. Now it was. I updated my will. Added a healthcare proxy. Wrote down passwords and locked them in a fireproof box I kept in the bedroom closet. I labeled everything clearly, so that when the time came, and it would come, someday, no one would have to guess. No one would have to fight. I was editing my life. Gently. Carefully. With love. Not the love that shrinks to make others comfortable. The love that builds something sturdy enough to hold the whole truth. Breath. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the moment on the stairs, my daughter knocked on my bedroom door. I was sitting by the window with a book, the late sun slanting gold across the floor. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, hesitant. Looked around as if seeing the room for the first time. "It really does feel like you up here," she said. I smiled. "It should. It's mine." She nodded. Sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the quilt. "I've been thinking," she said slowly. "About what you said. About not disappearing." I closed the book and set it aside. "I think I've been doing that too," she continued. "Disappearing. Trying to make her happy, trying to make you happy, trying to hold it all together, and I just got lost." I looked at her. My daughter. 42 years old and still learning how to take up space. Then maybe it's time to stop, I said gently. Stop trying to make everyone happy. Start trying to be whole. Her eyes filled. She blinked fast, looked away. I don't know how. Neither did I said. But I'm learning. She nodded. Wiped her eyes. Took a breath. Will you teach me? I reached over and took her hand. It was warm. Familiar. The hand I'd held when she was small and scared and learning to cross streets. Yes, I said. We'll learn together. She squeezed my hand. Held on. We sat like that for a while, the light fading, the room growing soft with dusk. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever, not in the way we used to think of it. But it was something. A beginning. A breath. A small, sturdy thing we could build on. And that was enough. 3 weeks after I reclaimed the master bedroom, I woke to the sound of rain again. It was early, before dawn, the sky still bruised with night. I lay still and listened to the rhythm of it, steady and low, like a heartbeat. I rose. Pulled on my robe. Went downstairs. The house was dark and quiet. I didn't turn on the lights. I liked the dim blue stillness, the way everything felt hushed and held. I made tea. Sliced bread. Set it in the toaster. While I waited, I stood at the window and watched the rain track down the glass, little rivers catching the first pale edge of dawn. I thought about the woman I'd been a month ago. The one who'd stood on the stairs with a cooling cup of tea and heard her daughter say she didn't belong. That woman had been confused. Hurt. Small. This woman, me, now, was not small. I was clear. I was whole. I was mine. The toast popped. I buttered it, poured the tea, and carried everything to the table. The chair by the window. The amber mug. The light is just beginning to break. I sat. I ate. I tasted every bite. Breath. This is what repair looks like, I thought. Not grand gestures. Not apologies that rewrite the past. Just this. Just choosing, every morning, to nourish yourself. To sit in the chair you want. To sleep in the bed you chose. To say no when you mean no and yes, yes, and nothing at all when silence is the truest thing you have. Repair begins where bitterness ends. I was not bitter. I was not broken. I had been bent, yes. Diminished, yes. Made smaller by 1,000 tiny erasures that accumulated until I almost disappeared. But I had not disappeared. I had returned. To myself. To my house. To my mornings and my tea and the light that came through the east window just the way I remembered. I had returned, and I was staying. Beat. Outside, the rain softened. The sky lightened from charcoal to ash to the pale gray of early morning. A bird called, sharp and clear, from the tree by the fence. I finished my tea. Rinsed the cup. Set it in the drainer. Then I stood at the window and watched the day arrive. Somewhere in the house above me, my daughter was still sleeping. Somewhere next door, Marianne was waking, winding her own watch, beginning her own quiet morning. Somewhere in the world, other women were standing at other windows, holding other cups, deciding whether today was the day they would stop shrinking. I hoped they would. I hoped they would remember, you do not owe anyone your silence. You do not owe anyone your space. You do not owe anyone the small, soft version of yourself that makes them comfortable. You owe yourself the truth. You owe yourself the room. You owe yourself the life you built, the name you carry, the dignity you were born with and never should have had to fight for. But if you do have to fight, and sometimes you will, fight quietly. Fight clearly. Fight with locks and keys and papers and the steady, unshakable knowledge that you belong. Not because someone said so. Because you are here. Because you are whole. Because you say so. Breath. The rain stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, low and golden, painting the wet grass with light. I smiled. Then I turned from the window, climbed the stairs, and went back to my room, my room, to dress for the day. A day that was mine. A life that was mine. A future I would write myself, one morning at a time, in ink that wouldn't fade. And if anyone ever told me again that I didn't belong, well, I'd know better. And I'd have the keys to prove it.